Hello,
Hello.
and welcome to another episode of David's Divergent Discussions. I am your host, David Gray Hammond, and today I am joined by Kelly Booker. So, um, today we're going to talk about sobriety and being neurodivergent. You probably know, if you followed me, that I have been on my own sobriety journey for the last 7 years, and I'm excited to have Kelly here to talk more about her experiences with being variety, I guess. But we're going to start simple. Audio description. So I'm David Gray Hammond. I am a white Mediterranean male in his mid-30s. I have a shaved head, a beard, thick rimmed, purpley greyish glasses. I have a lip piercing and an ear tunnel. I'm sat in a very blue room next to a famously rickety bookcase, and I'm wearing a red checkered shirt. Kelly, would you like to give an audio description?
Yep, so I'm Kelly Booker. I'm 45 years old. I'm sat in my lounge at the moment. So there's just a beige wall behind me, sitting on a brown chair. I've got pink, peach hair, colourful glasses, which are quite thick rimmed. I'm white, and I'm Welsh, although I don't sound Welsh.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, so Kelly, you run the Facebook page Behind the Mask, and
Yeah.
I think your page is relatively new, isn't it?
Yes, I created it on the 16th of April this year.
Okay, so I guess we'll do a bit of a getting to know you then for anyone who hasn't followed your page yet, which I highly recommend. So
Okay.
when did you discover your neurodivergent identity? What was that journey like?
That's a hard question. I started having thoughts about it in late October last year. I started noticing patterns. I've known that my youngest child, I think, is autistic. She's awaiting an assessment, and I have known that since she was around 2 years old, certain characteristics and behaviours, and also I've worked with disabled adults in an enabling support work capacity. So I've done courses on autism and things like that previously. So I know a little bit about it, but I guess I knew more of the stereotypical side of it. And it was only as my daughter started progressing and getting older, and she was doing things that I recognised, it was almost like looking in a mirror in some respects. Some of the questions she would ask me, how literal she was, etc. And she started doing and saying things that I remember doing and saying. And so I started doing research and looking into everything. And yeah, by November, I had referred myself to the integrated autism service in my area. And I had also been to the GP to have a referral for an ADHD assessment. So that was in November. I think, well, actually, sorry, that was in November that I went to the GP about the ADHD and the autism referral, and then I didn't hear anything for ages. So I actually then self-referred myself in January, I believe, to the autism integrated service, and they were very good, very quick, responded. I was very lucky, responded within a few weeks and told me that they'd all discussed it and they were going to assess me. So I'm now on a waiting list, which is 27 months long, and that was in February. So I've got to wait, but at least I know that's coming. As for the ADHD assessment, there was a few errors initially. I had a letter saying that I had an appointment at the ADHD clinic. Then they wrote me another letter cancelling it and postponing it for 2 months. Then the day before, I had to ring them because I had COVID to ask them if I could do a telephone assessment, to which they said that I could, that somebody would ring me at 10 o'clock for my appointment the next day. Anyway, when the lady rang me, she explained that there'd been an error and that she was the medications person, and that obviously, as I wasn't assessed, I would need to have that done. So I said, oh, I did think it was, rather fast that I'd got this appointment with you. Do you know how long it'll be? She said she wasn't sure, and then I waited another sort of 2 or 3 months to be receiving a letter from the locum psychiatrist to my doctor saying that I didn't meet the NICE guidelines for an ADHD assessment, and that he believed that I was suffering with anxiety and issues around food, which I do, and I had put that. I'd written like a 14-page document for the ADHD referral and a 17-page document for the autism referral. So I kind of knew that I had to be specific about what all my issues were, otherwise I wasn't, I was just going to get laughed out of the doctor's surgery. So I did all of that, and sorry, I forgot what I was saying.
That's absolutely fine. This is David's Divergent Discussions. We forget what we're saying all the time.
So, playing with my magnets here as well. So so the ADHD referral. Oh yeah. So then I went back to the GP. Sorry, I went back to the GP and was very upset, and obviously said that I didn't agree and that I thought that I did meet the NICE guidelines, and I double checked them myself again. And the GP said that he also thought that I did meet the guidelines, and he wasn't quite sure why I hadn't been accepted. So he told me to write down my symptoms in more detail, which adhering to the guidelines, which I did again, and sent those back. I then got a letter. Sorry, I sent them back to the GP, and the GP said that he was going to ask them to outline why I didn't meet the criteria. So I was expecting a letter of reasons of why, and I didn't get that. I got a letter saying that they were going to assess me. I have a telephone mental health needs assessment test with me instead. So the nurse rang me and a few weeks ago, and we had that conversation. I said that I felt like I was kind of being fobbed off because I'd gone from sort of, the psychiatrist looking at my case to being telephoned by a nurse to give me a quick phone call. She assured me that that wasn't the case, and that she was going to, after her lengthy chat with me, she said she was going to go back to the psychiatrist, rediscuss everything, but that she'd spoken to him earlier that morning before speaking to me, and he was adamant I didn't meet the guidelines. So obviously I was quite upset about that. I've waited 2 weeks for her to discuss it with him and ring me back. She did that today, actually. And she said that after speaking to one of her colleagues, they had decided that they were going to put it to I'm not sure if it's called a multidisciplinary team in that industry, but so rather than just take it back to that local psychiatrist himself, she was going to put it to all of them to discuss in their next meeting. So she's going to ring me again in 2 weeks to give me the decision that they've come to. But I have made it quite clear that after doing more research, I'm 99.9% sure that I have autism and ADHD. And, I'm 45 years old now, and I've struggled my entire life. I cannot keep going on like this. I need to not fix myself, that's the wrong word, but I need to find coping strategies, techniques, etc. And I think there's a lot of stigma around. They think that people just want to have an ADHD assessment now so that they can get medication, for example. I don't even like taking medication, and I barely remember to take it. So it's not about me just wanting to get some stimulants. I don't like coffee. I don't drink caffeine. I don't do any of that anyway. I just want the opportunity to try the medication and see if it helps me. And if it does, wonderful, fantabulous. And if it doesn't, I can tick the box off, at least it's been tried.
And I think that's really important, isn't it? Because, I think a lot of people find that they're sort of treated as if they're drug seeking when actually they just want support.
Yeah.
I know for me, being ADHD, it's very complicated because I can't necessarily take the standard ADHD meds because I have this history of psychosis and a very well documented history of addiction. And that makes psychiatrists pretty reticent to prescribe anything that might help with my ADHD.
Yeah.
But whilst we're on the topic of addiction, obviously we're here to talk about sobriety
Yeah.
today. And you know, for me personally, I'm sober 7 years as of this year, which honestly feels like a bloody miracle because there was a time when I couldn't have imagined being sober. For anyone not
Genuinely.
familiar with my story, I entered into addiction when I was in my late teens. I was drinking heavily, smoking cannabis, and then I moved on to taking much stronger drugs, and eventually ended up addicted to opioids like morphine and oxycodone. I was taking diazepam, which Americans may know as Valium. I was also
Okay.
smoking a lesser known drug, although if you read the news at a certain year, you'd know it was called Spice. They call it the zombie drug. And I was a real mess. And it was, everyone says, why did I get sober? And like, there's a lot of answers I could give, well, I didn't want to die and I wanted to live a full life and I wanted to be there for my family. But truthfully, something just kind of changed in my head one day. It was like I woke up and went, I can't go on like this.
Yeah.
And that was when I made the decision to become sober. And for me to become sober, because I was using so many different things so heavily, I had to go into an inpatient ward in a psychiatric hospital. I had to go through a detox program on that inpatient ward. And I came out of that inpatient ward off of most things, but still taking some things, such as my Subutex prescription, which is kind of like an alternative to methadone. And,
Okay.
eventually on April the 6th, no, sorry, April 2016, I had my first sober day. It was not fun at all. like,
But it
uh,
wasn't.
pretty quickly, I went straight into opioid withdrawal.
Oh
Um,
dear.
and I spent a month trying to get over opioid withdrawal because when you've been on Subutex, it's not a quick. The withdrawal is slightly milder, I would say, than some opioids, but
Okay.
it is a very long withdrawal. um, and even once you get through the sort of initial acute withdrawal symptoms, you go through something called post-acute withdrawal syndrome, which can
Okay.
last for like a year or two
Oh,
years.
blimey.
And yeah, it was actually 30 days into my withdrawal, I ended up back on the psych ward having a psychotic episode. That's probably a conversation for an entirely different podcast episode, but it was not a fun time in my life.
No.
And I think people often forget this. And I don't know if this is something you can speak to as someone. I think you said recently on Facebook you're about 15 weeks into
I
sobriety.
am 15
So
weeks on Saturday just gone. So I'll be
I
coming up to
don't
4 months this Saturday.
I don't know perhaps what your experiences have been, but I think a lot of people try and make out like when you first become sober that suddenly everything's going to be sunshine and rainbows and you're going to be walking along the street like, yeah, everything's going to be great. Actually, for me, like regardless, I found for a lot of people, regardless of the reasons that you get sober, especially when it comes to alcohol, it is so prevalent that sometimes it can feel like you're white knuckling all the way through it. Because for me, obviously, I became sober because I was addicted, and I
Yeah.
don't know how you identify. That would be up to you, not me. But
Mhm.
for me, as an addict, I was sent into a shop, alcohol. I went out with friends, alcohol. Like everywhere I went, it was alcohol everywhere. The drugs were actually, aside from the withdrawals, I didn't have to deal with too many cravings because,
It's not in your
yeah,
face.
it's not in my
Mm.
face. But even now at 7 years sober, I go places and I'm like, why is there alcohol here? Like this is not a place I expected there to be
Because
alcohol.
it's socially acceptable and because you've always got at the back of your head, I shouldn't drink. So you notice it more, I think. And that's the thing. It's if my next door neighbour bought a blue transit van tomorrow, then for the next 6 months, all I would see when I walk down the road is blue transit vans. Oh, is that my neighbour?
Yeah,
When I gave up smoking 13 years ago, and I can completely agree with what you said. Every single where I looked was cigarettes. And even if it wasn't, it's the habit. It's the habits that you formed. I would wake up first thing in the morning, and before I'd even done anything, I would have a cigarette. And there were certain times of the day where it would happen. So, I'd put dinner in the oven, have a cigarette. I'd eat dinner, wash the dishes, have a cigarette. And it becomes that ingrained in your, like, what you do. When you don't have that, like you said, people say to me now, oh, you must be feeling amazing. Wow, you're doing really well. Like, you've given up, you must be feeling great, and like waking up really fresh without a hangover. And yes, in a sense, some days I do feel, obviously I haven't physically got, there is that, but like you in the early days, I didn't go through withdrawal as badly as it seems you did. Luckily for me, and not so luckily for you, but I did, have headaches. I felt nauseous. I went through some sort of withdrawal, low key, but it was still withdrawal. And then on top of that, you've got the constant little thing in your head saying, well, when you feel crappy, you normally have a drink. Have a drink.
Yeah.
Have a drink. Just have one. Just have a drink tonight, and then tomorrow you can go sober. Well, come on, it's your friend's birthday. She's having a party. Well, I'll just have a drink tonight at her party. And that's what I did for months before I gave up. Probably, if I'm completely honest, I think I began to notice that I had like a serious issue. I'm not quite sure if I'm an alcoholic or not, but it was around just before COVID, probably about a year before COVID, that I had a conversation in my head of, you're drinking too much. Why are you drinking this much? You should be drinking once a week or once a fortnight. Why are you drinking 4 or 5 times a week? And it's not just a drink, like a 5% can of cider. I drink 12%, 13% wine, and it used to be 1 bottle of wine, and any more than that, I would be physically sick. I could not digest it. And what happened for me was grief. I lost my mum 6 years ago. So I guess my alcohol problem started then, but I didn't actually register it until about 3 years later, when I realised that I'd got myself in such a rut. And the day she died, I went out and bought 2 bottles of strong 12% wine, and I drank both bottles within an hour. And I wasn't even drunk, but it helped me sleep. And then the next day I bought 2, and the next day 2. And gradually over a few months, 2 wasn't enough. So then I went to 3. So I was drinking. I wasn't drinking in the day or anything like that. And I was still working, and, so I was functioning. So people don't notice, because if you function and you do the things you're meant to do, nobody realizes there's nobody there to say, oh, come on, Kelly, you shouldn't be doing that. That's a bit too much, because nobody knows. Because as soon as I come home and close the door, nobody knows what I get up to in the evening. I could be doing anything, and I was just drinking so much. It was really, really bad. And after about 3 years, I sort of said to myself, come on now, pull your socks up, snap out of it. Your mum's gone, and you need to stop using alcohol, because it's not going to change anything. It's making you fat. Initially, that was my issue. It was making me fat. That's what bothered me. I was getting fatter and fatter. And I hated the way I looked, the way I felt. And so then I thought, right, I'm going to try and give up alcohol. And I just couldn't. I actually couldn't. It started, I could go probably 3 days without a drink. Then I sort of stretched it at one point to about 5 days without a drink. Then COVID hit, and I worked through COVID because I was a support worker. So my little girl was still going to school with about 8 other children in the whole school. And so that was tough, because I'm a single mum. So I was at home on my own. So I was going to work. I felt bad because I was putting her in school and putting her at risk. My daughter's mixed race, and there was this big thing at the time about mixed race people being more affected by COVID. So, I had all of this in my head, as well as obviously trying to work and make sure that I didn't take any germs into where I was working. I was so worried I was going to make the people that I cared about, because I've got a big heart and I get very attached to people, and I was so worried that I would make someone ill. So I'd come home and have a drink. To get rid of the stress. And obviously it was a lonely time because nobody's allowed to go anywhere or do anything. So it was literally get up, go to work, come home, drink. And it was like that a lot. And I put a lot more weight on. And then, but I think the final straw for me of giving up was the last few months of my life. I haven't been able to do the things that I loved, which was walking and silly things like tying my shoes. Things we all take for granted. Showering myself, dressing myself, really, really struggling to put a pair of socks on and thinking to myself, what have I done to myself? Why have I done this to myself? Why would anyone do this to themselves? It's beggars belief that anyone would do that to themselves on purpose, almost. And so, but I still couldn't stop. It didn't matter how big I was getting. It didn't matter that I couldn't walk 50 yards without getting out of breath, or that I couldn't put my socks on. I still carried on drinking, and I still carried on eating, because I have issues with food as well as alcohol. I still carried on doing it, and the reason why I carried on doing it is because it was the only thing that gave me any short-term relief from how miserable I was. And then a few months ago, I went to see the weight management team, specialist weight management team. I'd waited 2 years on the waiting list to see them, because obviously I've known for a while I had a problem and I needed help, but I had to wait 2 years. And then when I went to see them, they did a load of tests, and then obviously I went in to see them. They told me that I was now diabetic, because I have other health issues as well. I've got PCOS, so that's a precursor for diabetes type 2, if you don't watch your diet and everything. And obviously the age that I'm at now, everything was taking its toll on my body. So they told me that I'm still waiting to see a liver specialist at the moment. So until I get that appointment, I don't actually know what damage I've done. I don't even know at this point if it's reversible or not. I'm hoping it is, and that I've caught it in time, but I don't know. So anyway, so I came home, and then again, you wouldn't believe it, I found out that I was diabetic and had liver issues, and they said to me, this is a big wake-up call for you now. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm going to do everything I can. Came straight out of the appointment, went straight to the shop, bought a load of alcohol, a load of junk food, came home and got wasted, and did that for about a week, because I just couldn't cope with the news I'd been given, and I didn't know what else to do, because it was the only thing that made me feel better was having a drink and eating. And I did that for about a week, and it was actually it was two things really. It was another content creator that I'd seen on here, a very popular one, am I allowed to say, or?
Yeah, you're allowed to say.
Yeah. So Claire Bowman, she's absolutely amazing, and she's based in Canada, but I resonate a lot with her story. She's got PCOS, she's got binge eating disorder. She was eating and drinking same as me because she was unhappy, and I was seeing a lot of her videos coming up, and she actually celebrated her first year sober, and I was sat here drunk watching these reels of Claire, thinking, oh my goodness, look at her, look what she's gone from to, look how amazing she is, and she was sat with this little cupcake on her birthday and 1 year sober, and she looked amazing and so happy. And I just thought, and the other thing is, what made her go sober was a quote she'd seen that said about, we all say we die for our kids, and I always say that, I die for my kids, and many of us do. And she said she'd seen that quote, and then she saw another quote where somebody said, everybody says that, but would you live for your kids? Would you live for your kids? And that's what made her really think deeply about it. And again, with me, I sat here and I thought, it's so true. I mean, I'm 45 years old. I've got a 27-year-old daughter, a 25-year-old son, an 8-year-old daughter and a soon-to-be 9-year-old grandson, and I'm 45, and I lost my mum at 57 to esophageal cancer, which is usually caused by drinking and eating bad foods. You know, and I just sat here and thought, what on earth am I playing at? What am I playing at? I don't want to be this person. I don't want to look like this. I don't want to feel like this. I want to be a better parent, better person, you know. But because I've got all of these other struggles in the background of being, I think, autistic and having ADHD, that has affected my life so massively from such an early age, all the way throughout my life. The only coping mechanisms I had were comfort eating, which I started when I was 10. So I was 10-year-old when I started binge eating, and I was 10-year-old when I first tried to commit suicide. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to trigger.
Okay.
Sorry. But so that, you know, and I just think I've spent my entire life trying to hide it, trying to cope, trying to mask, trying to just pretend everything's okay. I've tried counselling. I have tried medication for anxiety once, and that was during COVID, and only because the doctor again had suggested it, as they had many times before. And I said that, and this is why I'm saying I'm not just trying to get ADHD meds, because I'm not pro meds anyway. I only take them if I have to. And you know, the doctor actually said to me, look, if you were diabetic, you would take insulin if you were told you needed it, wouldn't you? And I said, yes. And she said, right. So why won't you take meds for anxiety? Because it's the same thing. So I agreed to try it. I took them for about 9 months, I think. I didn't feel any better. It didn't help me any. It didn't stop me behaving erratically in the way I do behave. So, and it made me feel quite sick and nauseous most of the time and tired. So I thought, well, what am I doing? This is, you know, I've tried it, it doesn't work. So I weaned myself off slowly, because I'm not a stupid person. I knew that if I just stopped them straight away, it would have a knock-on effect. So I weaned myself off, and as I say, I haven't been on anything else since. I've just been self-medicating, as you say, with alcohol and food.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to talk about the fact that, you know, as neurodivergent people, and under the umbrella of neurodivergent people trying to enter sobriety, we often struggle with things like anxiety and depression, or so it seems. A lot of the time, it's actually related to burnout, but doctors don't get burnout, so they just throw antidepressants at it and go, "Oh, why is that not working?"
Yep.
You know what? It's because it's burnout. It's not depression
It's
or
not.
anxiety. This
And
autistic person is burnt out.
Yeah, that's what, in that letter that the psychiatrist sent to my doctor recently, it said that they wanted the GP to treat me with they didn't use the word pharmaceutical, I think they used pharmacological or something, but they wanted me to be treated with that and with therapy for issues around food. And the other problem with that is I've tried getting therapy for issues with food in this area where I live, and there isn't any.
It is a real postcode lottery in the UK.
Yeah, not for binge eating and comfort eating. There isn't. There is for anorexia and bulimia, but I don't fall under either of those. I hate being sick. So, you know, so it's just all very difficult, isn't it? And now at the moment, I've got no alcohol, I've got no food, but you know, not bad foods, clutch foods, if you like, and no medication, and the professionals aren't listening to me, and the ones that aren't able, not their fault, but they're not able to see me for 2 years. And I just think, well, okay, so what am I, and not just me, but everybody, what are we meant to do? It's all right for people to say, oh, be positive, don't be anxious, cheer up. If I could tell myself that, don't you think I would already? You know, would you think I enjoyed being miserable and moaning and drinking myself stupid? No, of course I don't. I hate it. But when you feel like you don't fit into society and you don't even fit into your own family, how do you navigate that without help? How do you cope?
And I think that raises, you know, one of the big issues that I faced when I was entering into recovery was that the support systems that exist were in no way designed for neurodivergent people.
No.
Like from literal access perspective, they're not accessible. You know, you've got to remember appointments, phone calls.
Yep.
They want to prescribe medication, which you're probably going to forget to take.
Yep.
Um, you have different services bickering over who should take the lead. You know, I had mental health services saying, no, we can't help until his, drug use is sorted. And
Yeah.
the substance misuse services going, well, we can't help him
They
with
try
that
and fob
until
you
his
off,
mental health sorted.
don't
You know, and you end up falling through the cracks. And in the end, you do a lot of the work on your own when you're neurodivergent.
they?
And for me, that's why I started my blog, was because I wanted people like, they're not alone. And that's what I
And
think
that's
is a real
exactly why I
credit to
started
you.
mine.
You exactly. You
Mhm.
I was gonna say it's a real credit to you because, you know, sobriety is a really intimate and but also scary journey.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're sharing it publicly with people, and I think that does people a lot of good. And actually, I wanted to highlight this comment, um, from, Flynn Purple Bean, autistic artist, who says, "Congratulations to us both for putting in the work and getting sober." And
Thank you,
especially
honey.
to you, Kelly, because you know you're 15 weeks into sobriety and you've agreed to come onto this podcast and talk about it. That's huge because it's a scary thing to talk about. And I think you said this is your first ever podcast as well.
And I don't even listen or watch podcasts because I can't hold attention long enough, even if it's on a subject I enjoy. So, yeah, this is, and I'm not very good at technology either. So, yeah, this was scary for a number of reasons. One, I've got really bad anxiety. Two, I'm no good at tech. Three, like you say, it's my first podcast. And I suppose I am a bit nervous about, you said about doing the public profile, and I have, and I've done that, and I've been brave. And people say that, but I mean, am I brave or am I just impulsive? You know, I could just as easily delete that page as fast as I made it, because that's the type of erratic behaviour that I possess. And I'm joking about it now and laughing, but it really isn't funny when you live your life like that. Your life can change like that so suddenly, and you're just left there in the aftermath thinking, what have I done? What have I said? Why did I do that? Or, you know, it really isn't funny.
Well, if it helps, you're doing really well on this podcast.
Thank you.
And I think, you know, it really helps stories because sobriety is not a well talked about subject in a lot of neurodivergent communities. And I think it really helps to have people, especially people who are perhaps earlier on in their journey into sobriety, coming forward and talking about it. Because I can talk about early sobriety as much as I like, but I'm 7 years sober. I have a fundamentally different outlook now because for me,
Yeah,
it's just become a way of life. You
yeah,
know, I still wake up every day and make that boundary with myself that today I'm not going to do this. I'm not going
yeah,
to use, I'm not going to drink. But it's become quite a comfortable fit to do
yeah.
that.
And it
Um,
does.
yeah,
The same with smoking.
yeah,
You know, every now and again, I'll walk past somebody who's having a cigarette, or I'll be stood somewhere and someone will walk past, and I'll just get that little whiff of a cigarette, and for an instant, and sometimes not so much in the last few years, but before, I would take a deep breath. So I'd walk past and I'd be like, oh, that smells so good. I'm not going to have one, but gosh, it smells good. I don't tend to do that as much these days, so it does get easier, like you say. But you know, just because you're 7 years into it doesn't take away from the fact of that you were newly sober, and you know,
yeah.
and look how amazing you've done. And to be honest, you know, it sounds like you were on a lot of stuff, a lot more stuff than myself, and I think that is really commendable. Yes, it's
Thank
strong
you.
to give up alcohol, but to give up alcohol and drugs and all at once and all those different types, I mean, come on, that is absolutely amazing. There's not many people that come back from that, is there? So
No, and I am very proud of
big pat on
myself
the back for you.
for getting sober. But I'm also very much of the opinion that I don't compare my battle with another person's battle,
Well,
because
no,
the thing is, and I think a lot of people perhaps need to hear this sometimes, is that just because your battle might look more simple than someone else's, it doesn't mean it is, because
yeah,
we're each our own individual. We each have our own reactions and set of experiences. And I
we
know
deal with things
people,
differently.
I know people who didn't survive addiction, who were only in inverted
Yeah,
commas, drinking, for example. You know, I know people who perceptibly had a much easier time who didn't make it through. Um, but this is the thing: is for each of us, it's that very personal journey that we go on. You know,
yeah,
it's it's finding out what works for us. I tried all sorts of things. I tried 12-step programs. I tried therapy. I tried willpower. In the end, it took me having that moment of going, I just can't do this anymore.
which is what I kind of got to. What are you doing?
Yeah,
What are
yeah.
you doing? Have a
But
word with
the thing
yourself.
was, one of the things that helped me the most was finding the online autistic community,
Yeah,
because suddenly there were other people who understood the things I was struggling with,
yeah,
and I think a lot of autistic people can probably relate to this.
yeah, definitely.
My autistic identity was so frowned upon by wider society that I traded it for one of being dependent on drugs and alcohol, because I felt
Yeah,
David the drug taker was more easily accepted than David the autistic guy.
and I believe that.
And
Yeah,
that was one of the most profound aspects of being addicted, was that the person who I was naturally was so frowned upon by society that I would have rather stayed an addict. And it was only because I found the autistic community
mhm,
and found people who could accept me for who I am.
yeah,
My family have always been quite supportive of me, but there's a whole world outside of our family,
yeah.
to even have that
You
privilege like
see,
I did.
yeah, I said
Yeah,
I didn't even know until obviously very recently that I was part of that community, and a lot of people have said to me now, or people that know me are probably thinking, well, why now? You're 45, you've got this far. Why do you need it? You've done perfectly fine. People say to me all the time, you've done college, you've got jobs, you've been to work. Why do you need it? But they have absolutely no idea what goes on in my head every single
yeah,
day from being as young as I can remember until now. And I can quite honestly say that if I didn't have my children, I would not be here today. I would be one of those people that were lost. And that is the only thing that's kept me going. And I didn't know why. That's the worst part. If I'd have known 20 years ago that I was autistic and had ADHD, I could have sought out and help sooner professionally, but also like you said, through the community, and just to find people. These last few weeks since I've been on Facebook, and obviously I found the community kind of before that, so I wasn't really interacting, but I was all of the awareness online, had all of the awareness that's been happening in recent months, the last year or so. If that hadn't have happened, I still wouldn't know, probably. I'd still
yeah,
be walking around feeling like I don't want to be alive and still drinking every day and feeling desperate and complete despair and not knowing why don't people like me, why don't why do people get annoyed at me, why did that person get cross when I just asked them a question? Because to me it feels like it's a normal, perfectly reasonable question, and yet to them they think I'm being argumentative or annoying, and it's just like you just said, it's just so horrible for people to not understand you. And then that's what made me make the blog, because and since I've made the blog, people interacting and saying things to me, and I've had a few messages and things of people that just understand me, and also just seeing the way people speak to other people. in the neurodivergent community, I actually finally feel like I'm not horrible, useless, annoying, emotional failure of a person, which is how I've always felt. Now I feel like, oh, okay. So because I suffer really bad with ADHD rage, and I didn't even know what that was until recently. And I've suffered with that my whole life, and that has ruined most of my relationships, if not all of them. My outbursts, my emotional outbursts, my anger. I've lost most of my family, the ones that I was close to, because of it, because they couldn't put up with me anymore. And in a way, I can understand, because they didn't understand. But like you said, now those same people, not necessarily my family, but people that know me or are close to me or have been close to me, will be thinking and saying, well, what difference will it make? What's the point? Why does she need it? And that's why I need it. I need it because I need to forgive myself for all of the times where, I thought that it was me and that I was being purposefully, because it's like people almost think you do it on purpose, and you just, why are you like that? Why would you even say that? And you're like, well, and you just don't understand what you've done wrong.
Yeah.
And I can only recognise that now, seeing my daughter, because my daughter says things, and I even think, oh, can't believe she just said that. And then I'm like, well, actually, that's exactly the type of thing that I say and think. And so I understand, and I'm much kinder because I understand. I'm much kinder to her and with her. Yeah, I've forgotten what I was going on about then. I've gone off on a tangent again. Sorry, but
It's okay. It's okay.
But yeah,
But I
life's
think
hard, isn't it?
it is. And one of the things that I really want people to take away from this conversation and a lot of the conversations I have is, first of all, you're never too old or too young to fall into some kind of dependency or addiction.
Yeah.
You're never too old or too young to seek recovery and, seek sobriety. But the most important thing people need to understand is, to addiction, it knows no boundaries. It doesn't care what your race is, what your gender is. It doesn't care what your
How much
I don't know.
money
It
you have,
doesn't care what it doesn't.
status.
It literally, it doesn't matter what identity you are. You can become addicted. You've just got to have the right, dominoes fall. And especially, and I think a lot of professionals need to hear this, it can especially affect neurodivergent people. There's research at the University of Cambridge that suggests that autistic adolescents and adults are more likely to report self-medicating their struggles with recreational drugs. And yet services, they don't even standardly screen for autism and ADHD. That should be the first thing they do, because I
Yeah,
think they'll find that a lot of the people coming through the doors of their services are neurodivergent.
I
And
totally agree.
it almost
And
seems like an
they won't even know
inevitability.
they are.
No,
Those
exactly.
people won't even know that they're neurodivergent.
And
They'll just
it's
know that they're very unhappy, and they won't understand why they don't feel good.
precisely. And when you've got neurodivergent people who don't know they're neurodivergent, they don't know why the world is so cruel to them. It becomes almost an inevitability that something like addiction could happen.
Mhm.
And it's very reasonable to suggest that actually just introducing them to other neurodivergent people could make a world of difference when
Yeah.
it comes to finding sobriety. And yet people still don't even know that communities like ours exist, and people who need to know that we're out there don't know we're out there.
Well, I
Um,
didn't. And it's
you
only
know,
been, as I say, these last few weeks, I wrote a comment in one of the groups, because obviously not everything is public on Facebook, and there's a few sort of neurodivergent private groups that I've been invited to and stuff, which is really nice, and it's just really, I feel really welcomed, and it's lovely. And I wrote a comment in there about how, over these last few weeks, I have literally felt more like I fit in, and more pleasure to be around people. I know it's online, not physically, but I feel more at ease now than I have my entire life anywhere else. And you know, like people say, oh, and they see these reels or memes on Facebook, and everybody likes them, and they have a laugh, and they say, oh, everyone's a bit autistic, and I do that, and I do this, and just because you do that doesn't mean you are. Just because you do that doesn't mean you have ADHD, because I do that and I don't. And you just think, well, actually, maybe you do. First of all, maybe you actually do, and you just haven't looked into it enough. And secondly, those memes, they really help, because just to have that comment, there might be 380 comments, and most of them will be saying, I'm exactly the same. I have exactly the same thoughts, the same feelings. I've been through that. I can relate. And just seeing those words makes me feel, I can't even explain, it makes me feel that I'm normal.
It's that
If that's the
feeling of
best word for it.
that feeling of community connectedness.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, so, because I've hid a lot of my, especially like the ADHD rage. I say I've hid it, I haven't hid it from people close to me, hence why I've lost most people close to me. But I can keep certain distances, and I do from people because of it. But I try to mask it, and then I'll come home and have a meltdown because I've been together all day at work, and like most of us do, And then the same as children, when the teachers say, well, there's nothing wrong with the child because she behaves all day at school, and then the child goes home and has a complete meltdown because they feel safe at home and they can unmask. And I just think, I forgot what I was saying again.
That's okay. That's okay. Well,
Oh my
I
goodness me.
I wanted to wrap this up with some really good, some positivity. So, I was thinking, like, for me now at 7 years sober,
Yep.
what the thing I love most about sobriety, other than the fact that I now have my son and friends and family supporting me a lot, and but the thing personally that I love most about being sober is that if I want to do something, I don't have to filter it through, but how will I do that around being drunk or high? And I love that freedom, because being, drinking or using drugs, everything is filtered through. How can I do that and still get my fix?
Yeah.
And I don't have that weighing me down anymore. So, if I want to write a book, I've written books. If I want to start a blog, I started a blog. If I want to connect with people, I can connect with people without the fear that I'm going to get drunk or high and say something stupid that will ruin it. And
Yep.
I love that about being sober. And I was wondering for you,
You
being
just
newer to sobriety than me, what are the little things that you're enjoying about sobriety?
you just summed it up then. I suffer really bad with rejection sensitive dysphoria, and having that coupled with ADHD and ADHD rage is not a good combination. And then throw alcohol into the mix, that's not going to end well, and it never does end well. And I have said so many things to so many people in temper, whilst feeling rejected, being upset, and whilst drunk. I mean, I still suffer without drinking with it, but I can be a little bit, I'm a little bit more careful. Well, a lot more careful. So, I'll think, oh, and then I'll think, right, no, you can't say that. If I was drunk, I'd say it. And I've lost a lot of people, like mostly, I suppose, romantic relationships, because things have been too much. I've been too stressed. I've been overworked or overstimulated, and then I've had an outburst. And we haven't been together that long, and they probably think, oh my goodness, she's a crazy person, I don't want to be anywhere near her. And so they disappear. And it's a pattern that's happened throughout my life. So I'm hoping that now that I know that I'm neurodivergent, now that I am sober, that the positive that I can take away from this is that I can start tearing back the layers and, writing down all of my triggers. First of all, I want to know, what are all my triggers? How can I avoid them? How can I put things in place that are healthy? Replace all of the old bad coping techniques that I had that clearly weren't working for me, although they appeared to be in some ways, How can I turn my life around now, whether that's with or without professional support, because it doesn't look like I'm going to get that anytime soon, even if I do get it. But and they haven't got a magic wand either. They can't fix everything. There's a lot of work that I've got to do, and a lot of research, and I'm hoping that I can. I mean, I've kind of become very sedentary, and I kind of keep myself to myself and stay away from people mostly because I'm so scared of losing people, and I know if I get close to them I will, because they'll see the true me. So what I'm now trying to do is show them the true me from the start, instead of pretending to be somebody that I think they want to know. And then, if they're going to disappear, they're going to disappear early doors, and find ways of doing things differently so that I'm not presenting as so erratic and irrational, so that people maybe do want to be around me. I don't know. It's all a bit of a jumble in my head.
Moats Place the Page has chimed in to agree with you. Learning, understanding your needs is a great starting point. And I will actually say, obviously, professionally, I do a lot of mentoring, and I've worked with other autistic people seeking sobriety. And the first thing I do is to, help them understand their autistic self, so that they know what their needs are, what their struggles are, what their triggers are, so they can set boundaries in their life which are going to be protective. Because I think, a lot of us, we don't have the boundaries we should do, because we've been taught that our boundaries don't matter.
I have
And they absolutely do.
boundaries.
It doesn't matter
And
who
people
you
know
are,
that.
our boundaries matter, and it's important to have them. But it's been really great having you on, Kelly. It's been a really good episode, and I know you were nervous because it was your first ever podcast, but you have done fantastic.
I feel less nervous now it's over. So can we do it again?
Yeah, we can definitely do another episode at some point. But it's been really good having you on, Kelly.
Thank you.
As I said earlier in the podcast, if you haven't checked out Kelly's Facebook page yet, it's called Behind the Mask. Please do go check it out. And thanks to everyone who came and listened. This has been David's Divergent Discussions, and I'll catch you all in the next episode. Now's the point where we all wave awkwardly whilst we wait for the stream to end.
Oh,